Hey everyone, welcome to the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup. If you're not familiar with us, search for Bay Area Content Marketing on meetup.com. Today, I have a good friend and former colleague, Kathy Jordan. Really short story. Kathy and I worked on virtual events together before virtual events were considered cool. We're talking like before 2010. I think Kathy might still do some client work in virtual events. So today, Kathy says creating content is a process, but you can streamline it and still produce thoughtful work. We all want speed and quality at the forefront of every project. So let's talk about ways to make it even easier. From onboarding your designer to providing timely feedback, Kathy is going to share 5 tips to ensure a productive content designer relationship. Kathy, take it away.
Thanks, Dennis, and thank you guys for having me. I'm actually really excited to talk about this topic because basically my previous 15 years in my career as a marketer and a designer, I've always been on one side of the fence. And just recently, I started my own agency and I'm now doing both. I'm really a kind of a full stack marketer on both work streams, content and design. So I not only am trying to help my clients, but many of you that are, really trying to build that long-lasting relationship so that you can get more effective and more efficient work and just be more productive in general. And I think there are many ways to do that, but I've created 5 tips that will really help you guys be productive in your relationship and create that beautiful, thoughtful work. So I did mention that I was going to bring a surprise guest. So let me just do a quick cameo of that, and then I'll get started on my 5 tips. So sometimes content and designer relationships, they aren't necessarily friendly, but sometimes they are. Sometimes they're very friendly, and sometimes they aren't. But let's see what this one is. I think they're getting along. It's just sharing an idea or giving yourself a lending hand, right? Sometimes you just need to put it out there. I think they're having a brainstorming session, coming up with the next big idea. Who knows? But I think relationships can end up like that. So let's get started on the 5 tips and see if we can get there. Tip 1, start with a design brief. So important. Sometimes we skip this step. We just get started because we're so excited about the story we want to tell. We just jump right in. But if you just take a step back, it will really benefit you in the long run, reducing the time it takes to finish the whole project by up to 75%. So, and it doesn't have to be complicated or complex or long, right? It could be a 30-minute brief, and it could look a little something like this, right? Super simple. What's the project going to be about? What are my objectives? These are the key things that I like to include on them. Understanding the brand's existence. What's the brand's personality, the tone of voice, the style, right? Understanding those things up front will really provide value and definitely benefit the output of your work. Who's the target audience and the buyer persona? What's that audience profile look like? Get that on paper. And these are things that you can rinse and repeat over and over. So once you've established your brief, you're probably just changing a few of the goals, the content, the design direction based on each project you're working on. So it's a simple repeat process. So implement it early and use it all the time. Make sure you include any relevant design direction and content goals, right? What do I want that content to do for me, and how is my audience going to experience it? Those are key things to include, and there's obviously a plethora of others that you can look at, tons of creative briefs out there that you can search for, but these are just the simple fundamental things that I like to make sure I understand before diving right in. Tip 2, onboard your designer. I know you just created this design brief, now another step, but literally like you took that 30 minutes to complete that. Don't just throw it over the fence. Schedule a call and set expectations up front. And the call can be really, really simple. Review that design brief you just completed. Ask questions and align on the scope and the project and the goals of it. Ask those questions now so you're not like slacking them every 15 minutes throughout the day, right? To gather more discovery and get more information. And provide that anecdotal information on this call, right? Like, my boss hates the color green, so just don't use it, because he's never going to prove it, right? So just that kind of stuff is so important to include in the discovery session, to make sure that you're getting it across to your design team, or vice versa. But really, it's just so they understand and take all those things into consideration before they just jump right in. Understanding your working styles and the best ways to collaborate, get that across up front, right? I like to work at night. I'm super creative in the morning. Those things are really important and great things to really tackle up front. Because then, so for example, I really love to do design work at night, but I like to do like my thinking and critical thinking and problem solving in the morning. So, and math is always good in the morning, like they say, right? So telling my clients that up front, they'll know like, oh, she's working on design tonight. I can like hit her up with a quick inspiration, or, that kind of thing, right? So, and that always helps build your collaboration and your transparency, right? Is establishing that collaboration and the work style up front, and understanding the tools you're going to use as well, which I'll talk about. And then define and agree to your next steps before moving ahead, right? You guys, you have your design brief, you have all your questions answered, and now you've touched on your timeline, your project. Now what's next, right? Are we going into first version? Do we need to set up a brainstorm session? Understand what you're doing so you guys are both on the same timeline and you're moving towards the next milestone together. Tip 3, have your content and brand assets ready. Oh my gosh, this is like the gold for designers, right? If you come to a meeting with everything packaged, it's like nirvana, right? It's amazing, right? So package your brand's assets, your content, any resources that might be value for them up front, and have them ready. You guys have all these things around in folders, probably on your desktop in various places. Create a quick package for you so you have them already ready, and all you have to do is add in your final copy, or because some of the other things are always going to be pretty standard and persistent, like your logo files, your fonts, style guides, right? Previous design work you might have done. All of those things are pretty standard. So have that package ready, and then just throw your copy into it and rinse and repeat project per project. 4, brainstorm and share ideas. We already saw Lucy and Silas share their thoughts and brainstorm their ideas. Well, sometimes it doesn't look so friendly, but it can be if you create a really safe environment to do so. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time and thought to move a project along. So creating that space is really important too, because you want to make sure that people feel like they can contribute and collaborate. Without being kind of shut down, or they don't feel like they've been heard, right, and understood. So these are some of the core things that I like to make sure that are included in all of my sessions, so that my clients feel and team members feel like they can come to a meeting and really be open. So make sure you listen, use each other as a sounding board. Sometimes having writer's block or stuck on a certain problem, maybe just talking through it with somebody, even if they're not contributing or they might not understand where you're coming from, just having them listen might just, give you a light bulb, or they might give you a different perspective that you might not have, thought through or thought about before. So listening is really important. Sharing and provided pointed feedback instead of criticism. So this one is common too. And, on both sides, right, of the fence, is I've gotten feedback like, that just doesn't work, or, oh, that doesn't look good. Okay, well, how am I going to make progress and improve that from a statement like that? It's tough, right? So then designers start creating assumptions in their own head, right? Of, oh, they didn't like that because of this, or maybe they didn't like it because of that, So you don't want to create assumptions. You really want to get the feedback directly from your client, or directly from the content marketer. So in this aspect, providing feedback like, that really doesn't help me support the story, because it feels disconnected in it. And I'm really trying to show the connection between the characters in this, or, really trying to give them specific information so they can take that and run with it and find and problem solve and find an improvement or an iteration from there. So, is it the color? Is it the size, the font, finding the, and understanding the dialogue and the lingo that content marketers use and designers use is really important in this aspect as well, and during this type of format and session. And then value all ideas and concepts. Don't get stuck on one idea. Throw them all out on the table, filter through the noise, and then find the magic. There's always some of it in there, hidden in there. Collaborate on problem solving. Yes, work in tandem on problem solving, but collaborate and make sure that you bring your problems to the table and you can work through them together. And then practice empathy and trust. This is critical, because if you don't understand what the other or what your counterpart is going through, how are you going to be able to help and serve and support them, right? And make them feel like they can contribute and find their voice. So tip 5, provide timely feedback. This one is key, right? It almost kind of dictates, right, the working relationship and the way people work. Incorporating review cycles to ensure direction is on track is key. And providing that feedback is critical, because if you don't get it, then obviously you're making assumptions, but also you're going to be stuck in more iterations if you're not providing it timely. And you're also setting a precedence of how you're going to work with the designer. So if it's taking you a couple of weeks to get back to the designer might say, okay, well, I have more time, right? Or, they have time, right, to get this completed, versus if you're like responding within minutes, they're like, oh, they're eager to get this completed. So it just really helps drive the timing of the project as well. Knowing that if it's timely versus, time sensitive versus something that you have a little more time to work on. And here are some of the other things that you can do. Leverage tools to escape email. Obviously, many use Slack and other messaging tools. There are, Google Docs and being able to track your changes. That's all really, really relevant. And make sure you focus on the edits. Give edits time. Don't just like run through it, do a quick spell check. You guys are all content marketers, and you know how proud of you are of telling your stories. And then, so focus on those edits and make sure that you provide them with that final copy, because it is so much easier for a designer to work with final copy than lorem ipsum. Working with lorem ipsum is so challenging because you're supporting generic, generic text, right? You're not supporting a story. You're not visually telling a story. You're supporting random text, right? So it's always great to have that final copy to design with. And then prioritize your comments and suggestions. For example, if you want to get a design assignment completed within a week, and you've got some dream items that you want completed versus the things that you really know that you want done. So, prioritize those things. Like if you have time, we really want to get to these, right? 5 wish list items, but if not, maybe we'll do that in the next round, right? So prioritize those comments and your suggestions and give them those buckets so they know which ones they need to be attacking first. And then provide examples as reference points. Designers are visual people. We learn visually. We need to see examples and be inspired by visuals. So seeing something, even something that you don't like for example, you can say, oh, I really like how they presented this data set, but I really don't like how it makes the trends look, how it doesn't make the trends look like they're going up. So giving them that kind of say, okay, well, I won't use infographic styles like this. Maybe I'll try a different approach, right? So giving examples, especially visual ones, definitely pushes them along much quicker on the right track. And then obviously track all your changes and feedback, because you never know, an idea that you might have had can always resurface and become relevant again. So here are my 5 tips, quickly recapped. Start with your design brief, onboard your designer. Honestly, those 2 steps can take an hour and a half, right? It doesn't have to feel like a lot of work up front. Brainstorm and share ideas. Do it often and make it feel comfortable and open. prepare content and assets, have your package ready and rinse and repeat. And then provide that timely feedback. Make sure you set that precedence up front and that work style so that you both can create this relationship that is long lasting. And you can just, and honestly, once you create that relationship and you guys have a really good thing going, you might be able to skip some of these steps and move along in the future. So, but I hope you guys the best working relationships with your designers and your content marketers, and hope these helped. Thanks.
Thanks, Kathy. I loved the special guest, by the way. Very cool. I'll start with a question, but after I ask mine, anyone else can feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
My question is, I've observed on some projects where you have the client and the designer. There was one recently where it was the PowerPoint template design. And like the client says, this is what I want. The designer says, here's my, like, got first draft, and the client, it didn't work. They went to try 2, and then they went to try 3. So it basically looked like there was not going to be a satisfying design for the client. What's one thing you would try, like before you just scrap it and say it's not going to work out? What's like one thing to try that the client can try, or the designer to make it work?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. So I think one thing you can try is, I don't know if, so I'm going to try to use the PowerPoint template as an example, just because you used it. But one thing you can try is if you created a PowerPoint template in a generic brand, or like you created like placeholder copy and images and things like that, one thing you could do is actually take a presentation that the brand did, right? Whether it's internal, external, and implement that into the template to kind of see it in action, right? Because sometimes you look like it doesn't work for you, but there might be different layout options and if you see your brand assets in the template, then it really might bring it to life. And I think application is key, right? Is finding different applications for it and seeing if it works for you. And then if you've poked some holes and it really isn't working, then I would go back to the pointed feedback, right? If it's not working, what is specifically not working, right? Like define the specific details that aren't working. Is it the layout, right? Is it brand elements, the colors? Right? Space, right? What is it specifically that isn't working, and hone in on that before you dive into another revision cycle. Because if you don't understand that, I think the process of revision is going to continue.
Got it. Good advice.
Yeah. Anyone
with questions?
So I didn't know content people and design people didn't work together. I know there's sometimes some roadblocks between sales and marketing, or between sales and engineering, but I didn't realize it was such a big thing between designers and copywriters.
I think it depends. I've had some interesting experiences for sure. Depending on, also, I think it depends on the size of the company. So for example, working at a large enterprise where in many times your creative design resources are shared, right, across teams, and they're a little bit more distant, right? You're not working next to them or as closely. And in that case, right, they're working, if they are a shared team, they might be working on different types of project, like physical or traditional media types, maybe print, and then they have to go and change gears to some digital, right, design assets, right? And sometimes, the skill set doesn't translate as quickly. So I've noticed things like that. And then, speed as well hasn't translated as well from a designer perspective, depending on where they're coming from. But I have noticed some gaps in understanding also the story and the brand, right, that we're working for. In many cases, when you have like large organizations with design teams, they don't have the visibility that marketers do, right? So bringing some of that into the design team. And that's why it's so important to share design briefs and some of that context, because sometimes they don't even get it, right? Like, oh, I've worked with folks where they didn't even know we were launching a new product, like the design team, like at a company, right? So, they didn't know it until I said, oh, we're going to design a piece like for a product launch. Like, oh my God, we're launching a new product. Right. So, So getting them getting that information up front, right, really helps. And I have seen a little bit of like, oh, some of the more typical is, oh, they don't work quick enough, or they don't understand what I'm trying to say. Or, those are the common ones, or, oh, I've seen that before, like everything looks the same, So just getting through a little bit of those just common, things that you hear, you can do that pretty quickly by establishing some of these tips at the project start. Anyone else? Any questions?
Yeah, I kind of have a comment along that similar vein. In the projects I've worked with, it hasn't been where the content person has fully developed the content and hands it over to designer. It's more that the creative lead and the marketing lead are on equal footing, and they're kind of competing or jockeying a little bit for who's got the big idea, or how are they going to express it, either verbally in words in the narrative, or how they're going to express it in images and visuals. So any thoughts on how to, and when you're both equal partners and it's not clear that one is taking the lead, what you've outlined is a little bit where the designer is in a secondary role or the receiving role, which is awesome. That would be great if there's one person taking the lead. But any tips for when they're equal partners and really jockeying a little bit for, the art versus the science, right? How to express something, the big idea. And you see this a lot in agency models too, right? Sometimes the brand is defined by the ad agency rather than, by the internal marketing strategist. So
absolutely.
And just wanted to bring that up. And if anyone has tips on how they've solved that in the past.
Yeah, I've certainly been stuck in that as well, in previous roles. And, the one thing that I've done to kind of get me through it is pooling in other folks to help, right? Kind of help with the design direction. So I did mention, like, don't ever get stuck on one idea, right? Make sure that you put all your ideas out there to find that magic, right? So I think it's equally important for both leaders to surface their thoughts and ideas and then put them out there, and then pull in, maybe, I wouldn't pull in a team, but maybe one or two other folks to see what their thoughts are, and just to bring in a different perspective, because sometimes you need that, especially when you're really tied to an idea, right? And you don't want to break from it, right? Where you might need a fresh perspective to come in and say, okay, I've heard your idea and yours, and here's what I think about them. And hopefully that process, that perspective will lend itself one way or the other to provide some way for you to see which one might work better, or, might be the one that you might want to take a risk or try.
Mm-hmm. Good. No, good counsel. Thank you.
Kathy, we have a question from Michael in the chat. I will read it to you. Michael says, I've seen conflicts between new design and legacy content. One of my clients changed their website design twice while I work with them, changing the look and feel of the WordPress content I created for them and making it generally harder to find. What are good practices when you deal with current design when you have legacy content?
You have current design, but legacy content. Well, that's interesting. I've been through that plenty, and I've been through several rebrands, so it all is very relevant. So I think content inventories can play a little part in this, is identifying, especially if you're building a new website, is putting an inventory together and identifying the content that might be performing well, that is worth bringing into the modern design, right? And worth refreshing. So, identifying the top pieces that are performing, the activity around them, maybe some SEO power behind it. You might find that refreshing some of the legacy content might be okay. But in some cases, you might find that it's not worth the legwork. It's done its work, and maybe archiving it might be a better approach. Or taking an iterative approach and kind of, more of an agile process and putting it in sprints, right? And just, putting the content in sprints so that it does get addressed to become a bit more modern. But another idea would be to find a different way to recreate the legacy content in a new way. So if you might have like a long form piece that's long gone, you might want to recreate it into a podcast or a webinar series or something that is a bit more digital forward.
Excellent.
That help?
Michael says, thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier in your talk, Kathy, infographics. I know I hopped on the infographic bandwagon probably like 2015. It was like the hottest new thing. So I had some designed in the role I was in at the time. Then I feel like over the past couple of years, they've gotten just overused. So as we think ahead to 2022, do you have any design, what am I trying to say? Design flavors or formats that you would recommend we consider doing that might be like considered newish?
Newish.
Newish.
So yeah, I have a couple. So I have noticed a little bit of a trend in horizontal infographics instead of vertical. So that's becoming a little more noticeable. I have been seeing a little bit more of that in telling a story horizontally. So in some platforms offer the ability to do that a bit easier. So like LinkedIn has that carousel of images. So I've been seeing a lot of that and some good performance from some of that as well, especially when you're using it in a way where you're establishing like cliffhangers up front, and then you're telling the story to build the anticipation so that they do move their way through the carousel. I've seen that work really, really well lately, especially for like quick tips or building a cliffhanger, right? And getting them to drive interest. The horizontal infographic, and then obviously motion, right? Adding motion to anything static is, I'm not saying dead, it's just movement is becoming the norm, and building motion into your narrative and into your visuals will help you carry your story much further. And some of the things I've seen that have been pretty interesting is the ability to take like personalization and like personalization elements and integrating them into your storytelling. So using some of your smart personalization objects in email, for example, and then placing them on different elements throughout the email or landing page. So a quick example, I got an email, and it was in the email, it was a key, and it was like a hotel card key. It was like the image of a hotel card key, and it said, the room is yours, like free to book, something like that. So I obviously clicked, I'm like, oh, because it was like, it was a beautiful Ritz-Carlton, like it looked like, a beautiful 5-star resort. So I clicked on it. And then when I clicked on the page, it said like, we'll provide you with a free night if you fill out this form and fill out the survey, right? But the cool thing was when I clicked on the key, when I got to the page, it had my name on it. The key was going inside of the door for the, and then as I scrolled down the page, it was all moving with me, and it was a part of my journey. It was saying, oh, here you're entering your hotel room, right? And then that's where they had a little more information. So it was like they were creating the story with movement, but it was self-guided, right? So I I was basically reading the story to myself and guiding myself through that narrative, which I'm seeing a little bit more of as well, is parallax, like a lot of layering to tell stories, and scrolling and motion to move you down the page and move you down to the next item of the story. So a lot of motion is definitely something that we'll definitely see more and more of. And short, obviously, content, that's, key.
Now, did they get you to book a room?
Did they now? No, but I thought it was so cool. And then I shared it with so many people. So I thought, oh, well, at least they got me to be an advocate, right?
That's
Because
true.
I
Yeah.
certainly did that.
So not totally related, but I was reading an article page this morning, and you know how you always get the content offer prompt, it floats up. And today on this particular site, an audio doorbell rang at the same time as the pop-up. And I was like, wow, that is so cool.
Yes.
But once all the other sites start implementing it, I'm going to be like, no more.
No, because that happened with virtual events in 2010, where you had the little ping when you were entering a booth, and everyone's like, no, shut that off, right? But that's interesting that you say that, because it really, another key thing that I think we're going to start to see more of is multisensory, right? Is ways to implement multisensory experiences into our content. So one of the big things that I love to ask in a discovery or brainstorm session is, what's the emotional takeaway, right, for this piece? How do you want my audience to feel when they walk away from it? And that is the key thing that I always make sure that I have in a brief before I start, because if it's a launch, you want them to be excited, it's really important to understand what that takeaway is going to be, right? If you're educating, are you positioned as a thought leader, right? There's all these different ways to make sure that you're hitting.
I love that. Yeah, instruct your designer what emotion you want the viewer of the design to feel. That's brilliant. Yeah.
It seems so obvious, but yet so I've never seen it on a brief.
Oh, it's like one of my first questions.
Yeah.
It's key, right? Because it's and that's the work agencies do for commercials, right? But this is stuff we're doing. You guys, we're all creating commercials all day long, right? So it's this is stuff that we have to think about, and especially because we're all just becoming more empathetic and more human and closer to the connections we have with each other. And I think it's just going to be critical to just be more empathetic and find those multisensory experiences in the future. Cool.
All right. Little discussion in the chat between Rosemary and Todd about infographics. I think the general consensus is that interest is waning in infographics.
Gradually, it's gradually going down.
Gradually going down. Yeah. Other questions? We have time for one or two more.
Multisensory, Dennis. I wonder how you could engage different senses. Video, audio. Yeah. Maybe I'll throw in direct mail just for Dennis.
Direct mail. Well, so event professionals, they're doing it, right? They've become marketers and they're doing it, right? They're sending brand boxes, right, for a launch.
Right.
And right, you open up your brand box and you get to, experience the brand, right, in a small way. But Mark Zuckerberg's talking about the new skin, right, that they're coming out with, right? Do you guys remember the Power Glove, the Nintendo Power Glove?
No. What did it do?
Yeah, you do.
What did it do?
The Nintendo Power Glove. That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you, there are ways, right? But no, I think that there's going to be new technologies out there, new wearables that are going to really enable some of this sense work that's coming out.
Excellent.
Yeah, I actually know somebody that wrote a blog post on kits for virtual events. Dennis, I think you know him pretty well
That
too.
sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Did you, Dennis?
I did. Yeah. It includes some examples about
Oh, good.
I just put it in. I put a link to it in the chat.
Yep.
Yeah, it's still bringing in. Still bringing in search traffic.
Very good.
Mhm.
Good to hear. All right, and Kathy has her website up on the screen, so give her a visit if you're so inclined. And,
Will do.
Kathy, thanks for joining us today. That was really excellent presentation. You're getting a lot of kudos in the chat.
Oh, thanks, guys.
And everyone take care. I think our next meetup is on December, when is it? I think December 1st. Or no, I think it's, yeah. You can check our page.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Hope you guys have
everyone.
an awesome
Yes,
weekend.
thanks,
Thanks
Kathy.
so much.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.